Good morning and welcome to the Fundamentals of English Language and Literature Teaching, which is paper number 10, semester 3 of MA English Part 2. We have been talking about Unit 3 that deals with approaches and methods of teaching English. In the previous video, we talked about the structural approach, which is the first approach. Today, we shall be concentrating on the lexical approach. We started the discussion with defining approaches, methods, and techniques. And we said the structural approach, the lexical approach, communicative approach, and the humanistic approaches are various approaches that the teachers of English have to keep in mind while teaching the language to the students. The lexical approach is the approach that considers the lexis as the key unit of the language. The lexical approach stands in contrast with the structural approach. The term lexis refers to words and the combinations of words. The structural approach believes that the structures are the basic units of language and teaching structures yield better results than teaching anything else. On the contrary, the lexical approach believes that words and not the structures are the basic units of language. The words and their combinations, rather than structures, should necessarily be taught to the students to learning more effective. The lexical approach was proposed and published by Michael Lewis in 1993. Michael West, who worked in Bengal, India from 1926 to 1938, has also published a list which is called as the West List, which forms an important aspect of the lexical approach. A lexical approach in language teaching refers to one derived from the belief that the building blocks of language, learning, and communication are not grammar, functions, notions, or some other units of planning and teaching, but teaching of lexis or the words and their word combinations is very important in the picking up of the language. Michael West in 1953 has come out with a general service list called GSL, which is very interesting to talk about in this context. The general service list is a list of roughly 2,000 words that are published by Michael West in 1953. The words are selected to represent the most frequent words of English and were taken from a corpus of written English. The target audience was English language learners and ESL teachers. ESL can be taken as English taught as second language, or ESL could be English for specific purposes or English for second language purposes. The list consists of only head words, which means that the word be, for example, is very high on the list, with am, is, are that are used as present tense, was and were used as past tense, and be, been, being, which are used for the transformation of sentences. The list is important because a person who knows all the words on the list and their related families would understand approximately 90-95% of the colloquial speech and 80-85% of common written texts. The GSL is not a list based solely on frequency, but it includes groups of words on a semantic basis. There are two major updates of the GSL ever since it was published in 1953. The new General Service List, the new GSL by Brezina and Goblesova, originally published in Applied Linguistics in 2013, is quite important as the first update. This word list is based on the analysis of 4 language corpora of a total size of over 12 billion words. The second is the new General Service List, NGSL, that is published in 2013 by Brown, Culligan and Phillips. The NGSL was based on a 273 million word subsection of the 2 billion word combinations of the Cambridge English corpus. Preliminary results show that the new list provides a substantially higher degree of coverage with fewer words. Some ESL dictionaries use the General Service List as their controlled defining vocabulary. In the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English, each definition is written using the 2000 word Longman defining vocabulary based on the general list of Michael West. The lexicon approach theoretically believes it accepts the Michael West's list, and the theory of lexical approach partly also rests on Noam Chomsky's theory of language. Chomsky's theory of language stresses innate capacity of the native speaker to create new sentences. According to Chomsky, human beings are born with language acquisition device LAD that enables them to create multiple sentences. Language users can create many sentences from one kernel sentence or the base structure according to Chomsky. This is referred to as transformational generative grammar by Chomsky, which talks about the base structures and the surface structures. Lexical approach believes Chomsky's proposition as only a half part of the truth. The lexical approach holds that only a minority of spoken sentences are entirely novel creations, and word combinations functioning as chunks of memorized patterns form a major part of the speech. The vast stock of chunks with native speakers of a language is vital for the fluent proposition and the production of the speech. So, the fundamental principles upon which the lexical approach is based is number one, fluency depends on separate stock of words and on having rapid access to a stock of lexical chunks rather than on a set of generative grammatical rules. Number two, speakers need both a prefabricated automated element to draw on as well as a creative generative use. Both the prefabricated automatic access to the lexis and also the creative generative ability to generate new sentences, which is exactly the combination of Michael West's lists as well as Chomskyan generative grammar, enables a speaker to be more perfect. Number three, language is basically its lexicon. Unless and otherwise, the speaker knows the words to have the exact expression of the emotions, it becomes very difficult to express himself or herself. Otherwise, the speaker is left with the emotion and thought, but is bankrupt with lexicon. Number four, language consists of grammaticalized lexis, not lexicalized grammar. That is, lexis is central in creating meaning. Grammar plays a secondary role. Teachers should spend more time helping the learners develop their stock of phrases and less time on grammatical structures. The lexical approach completely gives emphasis to vocabulary and lexis. The word lexis is not a synonym for vocabulary. There is a distinction between vocabulary and lexis. Vocabulary is thought to be constituted of single items, while lexis includes not only the single words but also the word combinations that we store in our mental lexicons. Lexical approach argues that language consists of meaningful chunks that, when combined, produce continuous and coherent speech or text. The lexicon approach pays attention not only to single words but more importantly to collocations and institutionalized utterances and sentence frames. Michael Lewis states that instead of words, we consciously try to think of collocations and to present these in expressions rather than trying to break things into ever smaller pieces. There is a conscious effort to see things in larger and more holistic ways. He presents this taxonomy of lexical items as number one, words. Words will have the individual words like book, pen, etc. Number two, polywords. The polywords is a combination of the words like by the way, upside down, etc. Number three, it talks about collocations. Collocations would mean community always goes with service. Absolutely always goes with convinced. Certain words always go with certain words, and a knowledge of these words is essential to make a person effective in language use. So, an understanding of collocations is a must, and institutionalized utterances like we'll see, that's fine, it's okay, it's all right, These expressions are to be internalized for an efficient use of the language. Vocabulary talks about the single item or word. For example, friend, beauty, house, with their individual pronunciation, meaning, and spelling. Whereas Lexis talks about the word and its combination. Say, for example, one word is there like friend. All associated words like friendly, an adjective, friendliness, a noun associated with this, friendship, again a noun, befriend, a verb, unfriendly, the negative of the adjective, unfriendliness, the negative of the noun, enemy and foe as the opposites of friend, all these will become the combination of one word, friend. So, if one word like friend or beauty is introduced, all allied words and all combination of these words are to be understood and picked up. Only then the lexical approach has its validity. Collocations is the most important aspect that Michael Lewis has given emphasis to. Collocation refers to the regular co-occurrence of the words. Certain words co-occur in natural text with greater than random frequency. It is not determined by logic or frequency but by linguistic convention. Some collocations are fully fixed. For example, drug goes with addict, to catch cold, etc. Whereas, or maybe top to bottom, rancid butter, and so on. The other collocations are more or less fixed and can be completed in a relatively smaller number of ways. For example, if you have the less fixed collocations, say for example the word relative, it can go with blood, it can go with close, it can go with distant, and it can go with near or nearest, each with different shades of meaning. Blood relative is a very close relative that is associated, so your own sibling. Close relative is closer in the first generation. Distant relative is a bit far away in your relationship. And near or nearest relative is closer to you in terms of heart. So, for example, learn is a word. Learn by doing. You exactly do a work and learn. Learn by heart, which would mean memorizing the thing. Learn by observation, that is what the students of science do in the laboratories. Learn by rote, that's what we do in the earlier classes, like learn by rote the mathematical calculations, like mathematical tables, like 2 1s are 2, 2 2s are 4, 2 3s are 6. We learn by rote and learn by heart and then go into the meaning part of it. Learn by experience. So learn goes with all these with different nuances of meaning. Similarly is hurt. Badly hurt, physically speaking. Bitterly hurt, emotionally speaking. Deeply hurt, internally speaking. Seriously hurt, externally speaking. So we have different shades of meaning with the less fixed collocations. Learning a language would mean learning fixed collocations and less fixed collocations. The lexical approach has these following suggestions to make in the language learning. It emphasizes successful communication and not grammatical mastery. Lexical approach focuses on increasing the ability to break down the wholes into parts and use whole phrases without understanding their constituent parts. Lexical approach notices and records language patterns and collocations. It talks about the acquisition of language by a process of observation, hypothesis, and experiment. It believes in grammar exploration instead of grammar explanation. It enables the learner to explore the grammar by himself or herself rather than explain grammar from a second person or a third person. It emphasizes intensive and extensive listening and reading in the target language. The lexical approach carries out first and second language comparisons and translation from chunk to chunk rather than from word to word. And chunk to chunk translation and understanding is more important than literally word to word. The lexical approach believes in repetition and recycling of the activities and thereby enables the learners to guess the meaning of vocabulary items from the context. It works with dictionaries and other reference tools and thereby makes the learner independent of picking up of the lexical items and their use, and thereby pick up the language more efficiently. The lexical approach, to sum up, is not a revolution but an evolution. Along with structural approach, the following of the lexical approach enables the speaker to be a better learner. It is successful language rather than accurate language. Successful language would mean that communicative roles are maintained better, and it aims at fluency rather than accuracy. Structural approach aims at accuracy, whereas this aims at successful use of language. The aim of ELT is still the teaching of communicative abilities by focusing on the successful language rather than the accurate language. The originality of the approach lies in its claims about the nature of language. The distinction between grammar and vocabulary has become less valid, and more realistic view about language based on the supremacy of lexis over grammar is advocated. However, there is a challenge for this approach as well, and the challenge that the approach is facing is how to convince the stakeholders of teaching and the teachers themselves to change their mindset in favor of this new vision about language. Essentially, if it is in combination with the structural approach, the advocacy can be more appropriate. Thank you very much for being a part of this video on lexical approach. Stay tuned for the next videos.